Hey, what's going on, man? Coach Tyler here with Black Diamond Softball and Fitness, and we got a brand new episode of the Foul Pole to Foul Pole Daily Show for you. Today is Monday, February 26th. We're almost at the end of the month. Remember, this year's a leap year. We've got 29 days in this month. Before we get jumping into this episode, I do want to remind you about our YouTube channel. It's Foul Pole to Foul Pole over on YouTube. So it's youtube.com/@Foul Pole to Foul Pole. Today's episode is brought to you by the Carolina Patriot Collegiate League. Got a summer league coming to the Carolinas for college softball. It's going to be running during the month of June and July. I'm going to leave a link down in the description below so you can check that out. Really cool idea. It's been successful down in Florida. It's been successful out in California and Texas and other places. So they're bringing it to the Carolinas. And we're going to have a couple of different episodes on this year with Wayne Ritchie. He's sort of the president, the director, all that good stuff for the Carolina Patriot Collegiate League. So it's really cool. I'm really excited about that. So make sure you check that out. As we jump into today's episode, we're going to sort of recap what's been going on over the weekend. Had a couple of big top 25 matchups. Had some teams sort of bouncing back, had some teams laying some eggs, had a few teams not have the best showing of the weekend, but, we'll get into all that kind of stuff. Of course, Oklahoma looking good again this weekend. Had a couple of big games for them. Oklahoma State, they sort of did what they had to do this weekend. Had a couple of tough games. We'll jump into that. Georgia looking good. Florida looking good. Clemson looking good. There's a lot of teams out there that are really starting to sort of come together. A couple of big wins. And Duke, man, no one looked as strong as Duke did this weekend. Boston University and Duke had a really fun matchup. Number 7 versus a number 25 matchup. So a lot of good stuff to get into. So we'll start with Oklahoma. Had a good weekend. Their pitching staff, like Patty Gasso said, man, they have got an incredible pitching staff. She said that she could throw any of her 8 pitchers out there at any time and get exactly what she needed out of them. So that's always good. As you guys remember, I talked to Chloe Evans from UCF, and she was talking about having a pitching staff. And she said at UCF, they've got 9 that she knows can get in there and get the job done. So when you got a staff of 9 pitchers and all of them are different and they all kind of throw different stuff, have different movement, have, sort of this combination that they can go to throughout a game and really look at matchups, that really changes the dynamic of college softball. So whether you're recruiting or you're trying to get recruited, it's really changed the landscape because they've kind of gone away from that 1 or 2 ace type, really looking at girls that can come in and be a part of a staff versus looking at you coming in and being the only one. So I kind of looking forward to seeing how that sort of plays out over the next few years, because there are some studs that are playing maybe at the D2, D3 level, maybe even NAIA, that are going to have that opportunity to sort of transfer into one of these power programs. And then you also have these unicorns that are coming out of high school that are like freshmen this year that are pitching lights out. I mean, you look at someone like a Keegan Rothrock down in Florida that's, she's out there throwing like she's a junior or a senior. So, that's just one to name one, but there are a few others out there. You look at Canady from Stanford last year, just an absolute stud as a freshman, and look at her this year as a stud, as a sophomore. So she's got Stanford on her back, and she's carried the team in the circle. So as we jump into sort of what happened this weekend, we'll take a look at an Oklahoma squad. Really took care of business this weekend. Had a chance to play Mississippi State, which of course Mississippi State's a solid team, has beat some good teams this year. They were able to handle them 9-3 at the Mary Nutter. They went 5-0. They were able to get a win over Wisconsin 10-2, beat San Diego State 7-0, beat Seattle 8-0, and beat Loyola Marymount 9-0. So not giving up a ton of runs this year is Oklahoma. The most they've given up is 3, and they've only done that a couple of times. So you look earlier this season, Long Beach State, they beat them 11-3, and then this past weekend they beat Mississippi State 9-3. So not a whole lot of runs being put up on that Oklahoma pitching staff. And it seems like every game there's someone new in the circle or someone's getting more innings and really able to set the tone. And we know Oklahoma's offense can put up runs. I mean, the fewest runs they've put up this year, they put up 3 against Duke. They put up 3 against McNeese. So they can score some runs. In the rest of their games, man, you're looking at scoring, 4 runs, 8 runs, 9 runs, 7 runs, 10 runs, really putting up enough offense to really get the job done. And they are using a lot of players. It's not just go to my top 9 or 10. They're really digging deep into their dugout and into their clubhouse and letting some of these younger girls get some of this action, because they know as the season goes on, they got some big games. You're looking at the series against like a Texas, a BYU, a UCF, and Oklahoma State. Those are later on in the season. So they're getting these girls tuned up now so that when these games, come down to it and they start to matter a little bit more, those girls are going to be seasoned and ready to go. It seems like every game in the college season matters, but as you get towards the tail end of it, you can kind of, you see like Oklahoma, everybody's coming after them. There's a bullseye on them, so they got to be ready every single weekend. All right, so as we transition over into Texas, they had a top 15 matchup with Stanford, so we're going to jump into Texas. Texas this year so far, they are 12-1 on the season. Lost their first game of the year this past weekend to Stanford, like we mentioned before, with Canady pitching really good. Stanford is a solid team. Texas scores a bunch of runs, and they weren't able to get too many against Stanford. Lost that one 4-3. But on the weekend, had some big-time matchups. Louisiana, of course, we know the Raging Cajuns are a good, solid team. Able to beat them 5-0. Beat Colorado State in a sort of a back-to-back series with them over Friday and Saturday. Beat them 7-0, 9-0. And then came in and lost to Stanford. Was able to beat ULL again 5-4. So Texas, of course, full of speed, got a solid bullpen, can play some defense, had a few errors against Stanford. If you want to check out those highlights, that's over on the YouTube channel as well, youtube.com/@foulpole to foulpole. We got about a 10-15 minute clip with some highlights in there. Had a couple of miscues on the defensive side. Did Texas. So we know they can small ball you and they can hit the long ball. As we get a little bit further down into the season with them, a couple of big matchups for Texas. Of course, they play a solid Houston team a little bit later on in March, and then they got a sort of a one-off with LSU, and then they also do that with Florida State on March 20th, and then they kind of get into this grind of a season, does Texas. They go the 22nd through the 24th of March, they got UCF. And then they turn around. They got to go to Oklahoma State 28th through the 30th of March. And then they got Oklahoma the first weekend of April. And then, they finish the season with a Texas Tech. So, they have a mid-season grind. So we're going to find out a lot about Texas and what they have sort of moving forward. I'm looking forward to that big-time matchup with them in Oklahoma. I think if there's a team that can put the pressure on Oklahoma, I think it's a Texas team. As we move through the top 5, we have Georgia. Georgia looked good this weekend. Again, another solid team with only one loss on the year. There's a big upset win for Virginia Tech this past weekend on Friday night. Georgia is that team in the SEC that I think people are looking at that has a real shot at winning the SEC this year. A lot of top teams in the SEC, so who knows what can happen. But again, another team that plays solid defense, has that pedigree in the circle. Even that loss with Virginia Tech 5-4, that's a solid game. Virginia Tech is a team in the ACC that is looking to win it this year. Honestly, you look at what the ACC has to offer. Of course, Florida State is going to be your front runner there. I feel they got a big win over Florida State. But other teams in the ACC, you got a Clemson team, a Duke team that was just an absolute, bulldog this weekend. Just put up a ton of runs, played some great defense as well. But Georgia, they have a grind here later on in the season. They have to play. They have to go to Tennessee. They have to go to Kentucky. They do have a couple of home sets against Missouri and Florida, but then they're on the road at Mississippi State to end the year. So big weekend for them this weekend. Put up a lot of runs this weekend. They put up 10 against Radford, put up 8 against Dartmouth. Exactly what they're supposed to do. They're supposed to put pressure on those other teams, and that's what they did. The Wednesday this week, they have a big time matchup against a solid Clemson team, and we'll get to Clemson a little bit later on as well. I like Clemson in that matchup to really put it with Georgia, and I think that's going to be a big sort of a top 10 matchup, if you will. As we move on to the number 4 team in the country, it's Washington. Washington's 12-2 on the season. Really the front runner for me in the Pac-12. UCLA's having a bit of a down year. But if you look at the teams that Washington has lost to this year, they've lost to Oklahoma 4-3, which is a great matchup early in the season. And then they did get beat by Oklahoma State a little bit earlier this month, 7-0. They don't put up a ton of runs, but they play some solid defense, and they got some good pitching. As of late, they have beat a Pittsburgh team 6-2, which Pittsburgh is pretty solid. If you saw their matchup this past weekend with Oklahoma State, Pittsburgh can really play with anybody. As the season kind of rolls on, you'll see that they have a home set against UCLA, and they have one in back-to-back weekends with UCLA and Oregon State. But then they have to go on the road to Oregon, and we know Oregon is tough. California, tough to play in Cal. And then they end the season with a matchup with Stanford and then Utah. So it's a grind for Washington. A lot of solid ball teams out there on the West Coast. I like Washington to come out of the Pac-12 as the top team. Probably going to host a regional, and I expect them to be there towards the end of the year. As we round out the top 5 from this weekend, we have Tennessee. Tennessee, another solid team in the SEC. When we talk about the SEC, you've got Tennessee right there at the top. You've got a Georgia. You've got an LSU. You've got a Florida. Really have some top teams. You're looking at Alabama that's there. People think they're on a down year, but I think Alabama is just as solid as they have been. You got a Mississippi State team that can surprise some people. And, of course, Kentucky is a tough out there in the SEC. So if we look at sort of what Tennessee did this weekend, on the year, Tennessee is an 8-4 team. I think they're better than their record shows, but you are what your record says you are. Couple of big wins this weekend. Had one over UCF 3-0 and then beat Oregon State 6-1. They did drop one to UCLA, which, man, if there's any enigma in college softball this year, it's got to be UCLA. I mean, UCLA has been run ruled, and UCLA will run rule people. You really don't know what you're going to get with UCLA, and that makes them a dangerous team. And Tennessee was sort of found that out. Tennessee's got to sort of right the ship in the circle. There's really no identity for them in the circle just yet. They have a lot of young pitchers. My girl Peyton Gottschall, solid as they come. But then after that, it's sort of, what are we going to get? That's another team that's sort of got a tough road to hoe here towards the end of the season. Got a big-time matchup with LSU, of course. They also have a big matchup with Georgia, but both of those series are at home. They do have to go on the road against a solid South Carolina team, but before that, they do play Missouri at home, and we know Missouri can really play with anybody. Missouri had a good outing this year against Clemson early in the season, so looking forward to that. As we round out the top 10, like I said, a big weekend for LSU. LSU looks good. I think really the top 4 with the SEC. You look at a team like LSU that's 13-0 on the season, hasn't had too many big-time matchups, but they're doing exactly what they're supposed to do, beat the teams in front of them. They had a big test early in the month of February against a tough Northwestern team, able to come out on top 13-2 in that when they were down in Clearwater. This week didn't really have a whole lot going on for them. They did play down in Baton Rouge, had a couple of wins over Boise State, a couple of wins over Houston, and then beat Austin Peay to get out of there on Saturday. LSU does have a couple of big-time matchups coming up a little bit later on in the month of March, and as they get into SEC play. Sort of a doubleheader, if you will, a Friday-Saturday matchup, back-to-back games with San Diego State. They also play McNeese. They do have to go on the road against Kentucky. They got a home set against Ole Miss. They have to go on the road against a Missouri team, and like I said, Missouri's tough. They got to play. They're at home against Texas A&M, but then they have 4 in a row against Florida, which is kind of weird. You got sort of a doubleheader on Monday, April 8th against Florida, but again, that's on the road at Florida, so tough matchup. They do end the year with a 3-game set against Liberty, and we know Liberty is tough. So with LSU, not too many big-time matchups for them on the season. So the schedule is right for them to, maybe win that SEC, come in hot into that championship. I look for them to host a regional again this year, but big-time matchup with them in Tennessee sort of the middle part of April. So looking forward to that with them. As we get into Duke, Duke, again, man, what an incredible outing this weekend for Duke. Played solid ball. Beat a solid Michigan State team 22-0. So this weekend they were at home. They had I forget what the name of the Duke sort of preseason, or not season, early season sort of get together tournament, invitational, whatever you want to call, whatever they do that there at Duke in Durham in North Carolina. Had a couple of good games. They beat Villanova, do exactly what they're supposed to do, beat them 8-0. A solid Boston University team, a top 25 Boston team, beat them 4-2. And again, they beat up Michigan pretty bad, 22 runs over 5. That's a lot of runs. Beat a Villanova team 11-5 again, and then really just put it to Elon 14-0. So able to get right, able to see a couple of different pitchers from Duke. I think Duke again is going to be right there at the end towards ACC play with a Florida State, with a Clemson, Virginia Tech, a lot of solid teams there. So as you look a little bit later on down in the year for a Duke team, they don't get to Clemson until the 12th of April. So they got a Friday, Saturday, Sunday with Clemson. They have to go to Clemson. They're on the road this year against Clemson. But before that, in March, they do have a couple of big-time series, one against Louisville that's on the road, and then the 28th through the 30th of March, they are at home against Virginia Tech. They end the season on the road against a game NC State. So looking forward to sort of how this plays out for Duke. I think they're going to get hot at the right time. As we look at Oklahoma State, if you guys remember, early in this season, I was talking about how hot Oklahoma State is and how good Kenny Gajewski has got this team rolling. If you watch them play, they don't seem to ever have that same lineup. They always seem to have a little wrinkle, have something going on, and I think that's going to pay off there towards the end of the season. They got some big-time freshmen there. You got Carly Godwin that is just absolutely banging the ball, first baseman, freshman, coming in, batting in the top 3 of your order. Just incredible to watch. She is sort of a local hero in this area, not too far from where I'm at here. So I kind of able to see her and her family and do what they do. And her dad, Bruno, coaches a Rock Gold team, and looking forward to watching them play this year. But anyway, as we get into Oklahoma State, only really had a one bad beat, and I think that was to a Georgia team. They lost 7-4. Had a tough one against LSU. Also lost that one 7-6 down in Clearwater. But they were able to bounce back and get a big win over a Florida team before they left Florida. And since then, really this past week, was able to get some good gritty wins. They beat a Washington team 7-0. Beat a South Florida team 6-1. Tough game against Pittsburgh. Again, I don't think anyone saw Pittsburgh being in that spot with them only losing that game 1-0, but played a solid game. As you get a little bit further into the season for an Oklahoma State, they do have to go on the road against Baylor. I expect Baylor to win at least one of those games, but who knows what Oklahoma State can do to you. You do got a tough set against UCF, but that series is at home. They're at home against Texas a little bit later on. And as you get towards the end of the year, they do end the season at Oklahoma. So big-time matchup for Oklahoma State to end the year. As we move into number 9 and 10 teams in the country, number 9, Stanford really had a great weekend. Canady, does what she does. Stanford's 10-4 on the season. I think between them and Washington out there in the Pac-12, I think that's the probably the 2 better teams out there, West Coast this year. And anything can happen out there, but I think Washington's a little bit more solid in the circle and overall as a team, but there's a lot that can happen. This past weekend, had a couple of good matchups. They beat a solid Texas team, number 2 team in the country. Looked good, honestly. Texas had a few errors in that game. Stanford was able to capitalize on that. Canady in the circle was able to get the job done. Texas started to get to Canady there late, but, able to hold on would be Stanford. So they did beat a game, ULL team, 4-1, and then 8-0 as well. Beat Colorado State like they're supposed to, but it was a little bit tighter game, I think, what people anticipated. So they beat them 6-2 and 3-1. As we look towards the middle of the season and the end of the season for a Stanford team, a couple of big matchups. They have a sort of a back-to-back with Georgia the beginning of March. That's a big time matchup. I can't wait to see that. You got the Georgia Bats against the strong pitching from Stanford. They're towards the end of the season. They do finish their season at Washington and then turn around and have a 3-game set at home against Oregon. So the end of the year is really going to show you who the cream of the crop is as far as West Coast teams, because you've got a Stanford team that's solid, you got a Washington team that's solid, and then Oregon that can really play with anybody this year. So looking forward to those matchups. And, kudos to Stanford getting a big, top 5 win this weekend over a solid Texas team. As we round out the top 10, we'll take a look at Clemson. For me, I think Clemson's one of the better teams in the ACC. I think, you could ask 5 people and they'll give you 5 different teams. Whether you're looking at a Florida State, you're looking at a Duke, you're looking at a Clemson. There's just a lot of solid ball in the ACC now. They're going to end their season on the road quite a bit. They got to go to Notre Dame. They got to go to Louisville. But before they ever get there, pretty much the middle of April, they have a tough stretch. They got to play against Duke. But before that, they go to South Carolina. So big-time matchups for Clemson on the road here. This season, the ACC play doesn't start easy for them. Before they get into ACC play next month, or just a week away, this week on Wednesday, they're going to play Georgia down in Georgia. So tough matchup for them. They start the ACC season play, if you will, against NC State at home. They got a couple of big-time games sort of sprinkled in. You got a Georgia matchup. You got a Tennessee matchup. Longwood is a solid team. Overall, this weekend, another big weekend for college softball. A lot of games are on TV as we sort of push through this season. There's going to be more and more games on the ESPN networks and stuff like that. You have these tournaments like the Mary Nutter and the tournament that was down in Mexico. It's hard for every game to be put on TV. And I know there's a lot of fans out there that's like, how can I watch it? We're supposed to be able to see these games, blah, blah, blah. There's just a whole lot that goes on the weekend. There's a lot of games. So now as we get into regular season play, sort of conference play and stuff like that, more and more of your networks are going to pick them up. The SEC, ACC, the Longhorn Network, the Big 10, the Big 12, those networks will start to carry more and more games, and you'll start to see more of these players on TV. And as always, man, I always recommend you guys get to a game. Get out there and get to a stadium if you can, especially over the weekends. I know a lot of players and families and stuff are kind of in school ball, so not too much going on the weekends as far as softball is concerned. Shouldn't be playing travel ball and school ball at the same time, just in my opinion. I think you're going to wear your athletes out, but to each their own. But for me, this is a time of year where you need to be getting out there, getting to the campuses and stuff. Go do a campus visit, sort of walk around, check out the city, check out the town, take in the game maybe on a Saturday or Sunday, and see if you can see yourself actually out there playing with those players, being in that atmosphere and that kind of stuff. So sort of kill 2 birds with 1 stone. Go watch a game, go visit the campus, and then that way, when it's time for camping season, when you get out there and you do your campus visits and those officials, or if you're just going to a camp, you can kind of put some camps on your radar or take some teams off of your radar saying, hey, mom and dad, I don't see myself living in this city, or whatever. I didn't get a good vibe from it, or just whatever. Or it could be the opposite of that and go, man, I wish I could play at this, this stadium or play at this ballpark or whatever. I can see myself here, that kind of stuff. So take advantage of these games that are going on, especially over the weekend. With that, we're going to continue pumping out content over on our YouTube channel. We're always trying to put up highlight videos, that kind of stuff. And we do the full game breakdown highlights, about 12, 15 minutes long, breaking down some of the top games of the week. That's over on the YouTube channel, youtube.com/@foulpole2foulpole. We do have a couple episodes coming up that will be dropping this week and next of our interviews, our podcast episodes, the ones where we have our guests. If you want to see what our guests look like, you can also check that out on the YouTube channel. We'll continue putting out the audio versions wherever you're listening to this episode at. We're going to continue putting it out there, whether it's on iTunes or Apple or Spotify or wherever. Google Podcasts are going away, but you can check out all the episodes that you normally would get on Google. You can get those on YouTube now. So you can even get the audio version on YouTube now, which is really cool. So if you're on YouTube and you're doing your thing, appreciate you guys watching and listening to these episodes. from the bottom of my heart. It really means a lot to me that you guys are checking that out. So if you know somebody that does like these episodes or may like these episodes, you got a friend that gets into softball podcasts, send them over here to this one to have them check it out. And if you send it to a friend, or if you share it with a friend, be sure you tell them you love them.